All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're decoding a feeling that, well, a lot of us know. That deep, almost instinctual discomfort you get when you're suddenly the center of attention. We're going to explore the psychology behind why some of us just shrink from the spotlight. And I promise you, the reasons are way more complex and honestly more fascinating than you probably think.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Have you ever felt that sudden jolt of anxiety when a whole room just turns and looks at you? It could be a surprise party, or an unexpected shout-out in a meeting, or even just hearing your name called out across a crowd. For some people, that's pure energy. But for you, it might feel less like a gift and a lot more like a social ambush, right? Now, for years, the go-to explanation has been, "Oh, you're just shy," or "You must be an introvert." But the psychological reality? It is so much deeper than that. Hating the center of attention isn't just some simple personality quirk. It's often a really sophisticated adaptation. It's a sign of something much more profound going on under the surface. So here's the game plan for how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to move way beyond those simple labels. Then we'll get into what I call your internal operating system. After that, we'll look at what happens with an overstimulated nervous system, dig into some echoes from your past, and finally, this is the best part, we're going to reframe all of this as a genuine strength. Okay, first things first. We have to move past those simple, one-word labels like shy, because honestly, they just don't even begin to tell the whole story. So let's start by taking a look at your internal operating system. You know, the cognitive and value-based programming that really shapes how you experience the outside world. And the first key idea here is something called internal validation. You see, we live in a world that pretty much runs on likes and shares and public praise. But you might operate on a completely different frequency. You have this stable, internal sense of self-worth that just doesn't need external applause to feel real. So what does that actually feel like? Well, it means your identity isn't on some roller coaster that skyrockets with cheers and then plummets with silence. You don't need a public announcement to feel like you exist because, and this is so important, you already know your worth, on your own terms.
And that leads us right to the next piece of the puzzle. Autonomy. This is all about putting a really high value on your own independence, your freedom from all those unspoken social rules and pressures that come bundled with being in the spotlight.
Think about it. When you're the center of attention, there are these invisible rules, right? You're suddenly supposed to be happy on command. You're supposed to perform gratitude. And if you're someone who really values autonomy, you're going to naturally push back against that. You'd much rather be in control of your own time and energy, not have it dictated to you by a crowd. When you put it all together, it points to a core preference in your wiring. You are just geared to prefer depth over spectacle. In psychology, this is actually linked to higher reflective thinking. It means you get way more out of a single deep one-on-one conversation than you ever would from being the life of some big, loud party. The spectacle just feels shallow. The quiet, though, that's where your rich inner world really gets to shine. Okay, so we've talked about the mind stuff. Now let's shift gears and look at the biology of it all. If you find social events to be completely and totally draining, believe me, this next part about the overstimulated nervous system is going to make so much sense. This brings us to a trait called high social sensitivity. All this really means is that your nervous system is wired to process social information, things like tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, with incredible depth and intensity. And the result? You just get overstimulated way faster than most people. So while everyone else is just kind of enjoying the party, your brain is working serious overtime. You're not just listening, you're processing every subtle shift in vocal tone. You're not just looking, you're noticing every tiny micro-expression in the room. Is it any wonder you feel completely wiped out afterwards? That sudden spike of attention doesn't register as excitement for you. Your brain flags it as a major stress event that requires a ton of energy to deal with. And this can get amplified by another trait, hypervigilance. This is something that often develops if you grew up in a kind of unpredictable environment. It's like your internal threat detector is permanently stuck on high, constantly scanning the room for any potential problems or shifts in the mood. For you, safety comes from being able to quietly observe from the sidelines. That's your home base. But the second all eyes are on you, that ability to scan the room is just gone. Your main defense mechanism gets disabled, and your brain justifiably goes on high alert. You see, you don't want to be watched. Your survival instinct is telling you to be the watcher. So how do we develop these tendencies in the first place? Well, let's dig into how our past can shape us. In Echoes from Your Past, we're going to look at how the roles we play as kids can have a huge, lasting impact.
So let's trace how this happens, because it's a really clear progression. It often starts with becoming the easy child. First, you learn a simple rule. Being low maintenance and not causing any trouble is the best way to keep the peace at home. Step 2. You start to actively train yourself to stay invisible, to make sure you're not adding any more pressure or stress to the family. And the result? As an adult, being the center of attention now feels fundamentally dangerous because it shatters that old, deeply wired survival rule. Stay small, stay quiet, and you'll stay safe.
Okay, we have covered so much of the why. Now, let's talk about the what. What does this all mean? In this last section, the strength in stillness, we're going to completely reframe this tendency, not as some kind of flaw, but as a legitimate superpower. I want you to just take a breath and really let this sink in. Walking alone or staying quiet doesn't mean something is wrong with you. This isn't just a nice phrase, it's a powerful shift away from judging ourselves and towards understanding ourselves.
So here's the big breakthrough. If you've ever felt weird for wanting to hang back in the shadows, I want you to remember this. Your aversion to the spotlight, it often means your mind simply works with a greater level of awareness. It means you probably possess a higher degree of sensitivity, not as a weakness, but as a finely tuned tool for perception. And maybe most importantly, it means you hold a much higher standard for what you consider a truly meaningful connection.
And that brings us to one last thought I want to leave you with. For so long, we've been taught to see this quiet nature as a problem, as something that needs to be fixed. But after everything we've just uncovered, I want you to really consider this question. Is your quietness actually your greatest strength?